Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. So tonight's Masechta will be on Kusubos. So Kusubos deals with a man and woman's obligation to each other. So it includes the obligation before marriage, during marriage, and in a case, an event, and a divorce. So the Kusuba is a contract with financial obligations. Now, on page 11a, the Mishnah discusses how women are financially compensated differently. So for example, if a virgin gets married, she could be compensated up to 200 zuz, which is the ancient currency. However, for a divorced woman, it would be only 100 zuz. So you have the differences of compensation for a woman who's a virgin and a woman who's for example, divorced. Now, it's very interesting because on page 11a, they discuss these different financial compensations. So how does this entire Gemara start? The first Mishnah discusses that virgins usually get married on Wednesday and widows married on Thursday. So why is that? So if a situation happens, because back in the ancient times, there would be a great amount of time between Kedushin and Nisuin. It could be several months, maybe sometimes years would go by. So if after the wedding night, the man comes back and has a complaint that he married someone who, Chas v'shalom, was unfaithful, he could go to court. And court used to be held on Monday and Thursdays. So it's a very peculiar way to start the Gemara, something quite negative of having to go to court because of a lack of trust or possible allegations that the woman might have not been faithful. Now, if anybody ever says that Judaism is a religion that does not protect women, they're completely wrong. Just read this Gemara. There's a lot of technicalities implemented to ensure the safety of the woman, that in case of a divorce or even death of her husband, she will be protected. So I'll just give you a couple of quick snippets. On page 78a, a woman who marries and brings property into the marriage, what she could do is she can actually have the property appraised, and the value that's fixed will be recorded in the Kusuba. So in an event of death or divorce, that will be recorded in the Kusuba. This term actually is called, in Hebrew speakers, son barzel, which is iron sheep, which is talking about the enduring value of this mechanism. There's another mechanism on page 97a4 that talks about a deceased husband's estate is mortgaged for his widow's Kusuba and sustenance. And in fact, the woman can actually sell the estate to obtain these entitlements. So she doesn't need to consult to a court. There used to be a court of 3 judges. She can actually have 3 knowledgeable people who understand the value of real estate. So there's also another very peculiar thing that's mentioned on page 61b2. A husband is obligated to satisfy his wife's conjugal needs. So I want to be very sneeze about this, but a man has to satisfy his wife's conjugal needs, and if he does not, that's actual grounds for divorce. So this doesn't seem like a very positive document, this Kusuba. We're talking about all these technicalities that are mentioned. And how does this entire Gemara end? It's actually very apropos to this time of year. The Gemara ends and talks about the trials and tribulations that the Yidden are going to suffer before Mashiach comes. In particular, Torah scholars. They're going to have a very hard time. And actually, the Gemara says they'll be vilified. But then at the last section of this Gemara, the Gemara explains that something special is going to happen. That trees that do not bear fruit, for example, the fig tree or the grapevine, suddenly in Eretz Yisrael, these trees are going to be able to bear fruit. And the reason for this happening in the first place is that when Adam and Chava had the initial sin of eating the forbidden fruit, a lot of these trees lost it. One of the consequences is that there are a lot of trees that were no longer able to bear fruit. So how do we put all of this together? Marriage doesn't seem like the most positive thing if you look at all these different mechanisms. But there's a couple of, the Gemara mentions something, and this is sort of how it's a beautiful concept comes out of all of this. The Mishnah mentions on page 61b5 that in fact a man may leave his wife only for the purpose if he wants to study Torah. However, he needs his wife's permission before doing this. And there's actually a beautiful story, which I'm not going to get into the details with, of Rabbi Akiva's wife. So she made a deal with him without telling her father that he can go study for Torah for 12 years. And he brought back, I think it was 12,000 students. And then again, there was another second period. He went for another 12 years and he brought 24,000 students. So he had the blessing of his wife. So when his wife approached him after 24 years, they saw this person who was not dressed very appropriately saying, let me tell you something, Rabbi Akiva said, because the students were trying to move her away. My Torah portion is because of my wife, and so is yours. So there's a very beautiful story that is mentioned that really puts all of this together on page 62b2. So on 62b2, Rebbe wanted to marry off his son. So he actually made the shidduch with Rabbi Yossi. So they made a deal. Between Kedushin and the chuppah, there's going to be 12 years. And for what purpose? So his son could go learn Torah. So what they did is they presented the kala to Rebbe's son, and he looked at her and he became very satisfied. Says, you know what? Let's forget the 12 years. Why don't we just make it 6 years? I'll learn Torah for 6 years, and they'll get married. A couple of minutes later, they passed the kala in front of him, and he said, you know what? We'll scrap the 12 years. I'll get married, and then I'll learn Torah. So then when he saw his father later, and he seemed a bit embarrassed about his behavior, so his father said, actually, you think you think so well that Hashem had the same thoughts as you. So why is that? Initially, Hashem wanted for Bnei Israel to leave Mitzrayim, bring them to Eretz Yisrael, and then they would build the Beis HaMikdash. But Hashem's desire and love to be with the Yidden was so strong, he said, you know what? For most of the time that you'll be in the desert, we'll build a Mishkan. So we'll forget the plans of building Beis HaMikdash, we'll build a Mishkan in the desert. And Midrashic literature usually discusses, and it's been mentioned so many times, that the bond between the Yidden and Hashem at Mount Sinai was like a wedding. And what was the main force that united Hashem and Yidden? Is the Torah. So now we're going to look at, now we can actually put all the pieces together. Why is the Gemara discussing all these laws and the Kusuba, and it ends about a bunch of trees bearing fruit, and why does this all why are we talking about Adam and Chava's sin? So the answer actually is written on page 7b4 or 8a1. And this is something we all know. When we go to a wedding, what's the main highlight? And one of the main highlights is the Sheva Brachot. So you would imagine that the Sheva Brachot would probably focus on the first Jewish couple ever, Abraham and Sarah, or maybe the first Jewish-born Yid, which was Yitzchak and Rivka, or maybe Moshe Rabbeinu and his wife Tzipporah. But no, who are we focusing on? Adam and Chava. So I'm not going to start repeating all the Sheva Brachas because we've heard it before, but look at the theme on each of the structure of the Sheva Brachas. The first bracha is when Adam and Eve got married, Hashem showered them with kindness and he attended to all their needs. The second bracha was the creation of Adam. The third bracha is how Hashem built Chava from Adam. So we know in Breshis there's Rashi, and explains that Adam and Chava, they were actually built like a Siamese twins, and actually Hashem put Adam to sleep and basically removed part of Chava and built Chava that way. The fifth bracha is actually very special. It says that every couple should have the joy that Adam and Chava had, that in their wedding they should have in their wedding. So, and the best part is they got married in a very special place. Where did they get married? Not in Chateau Royal, where half my cousins got married in Laval. They got married in Gan Eden, a very special place. And what's the last bracha? The last bracha is the 10 expressions of joy, where they're linked to the Chassan and the Kala, and it talks about how Shem erected 10 canopies in Gan Eden for Adam and Chava. And it actually praises Hashem for creating a special union between a husband and wife. And this is the true joy. And actually it ends, the last bracha ends, Hashem who gladdens the Chassan and the Kala. So at the end of the day, the union of a husband and wife is actually a beautiful thing. So even though we're talking about this, we're scared that you have to have the weddings on a Wednesday because we're worried that maybe she cheated and all these other things. At the end of the day, the most beautiful union in the world is the union of a husband and wife, and it's likened to Hashem's union to the Yid and the Jewish people. And on top of that, when you have a wife who's a nation's child who encourages you to study Torah, that is actually the link in order to repair. Chassidus discusses constantly the idea to repair the sin of Adam and Chava through Torah study. So you need to have a nation's child behind you to do that. And then you have the most beautiful union, which is between husband and wife. So this week we're very close to Tisha B'Av. Hashem is going to redeem us and Mashiach, and we can be at a galus and avoid a very difficult fast on Sunday. And but Mirz Hashem, we'll have the real union of the Yidden and Hashem, and we'll be in Eretz Yisrael as soon as possible. So I'll read the last section. Does anybody have to say Kaddish tonight? Or like to say it after? All right. Well, any volunteers in a second? Okay. So I'll read the last section. Okay. The Gemara concludes the tractate on a positive note. Amar Rav Hiya bar Ashi, Amar Rav Ashi bar Ashi said in the name of Rav, Atidin kol alichen serat be'eretz Yisrael shitanu perot. All the barren trees that are in Eretz Yisrael are destined to bear fruit. שנאמר כי עץ נשא פריו, תאנה וגפן נתנו חלה, as it says, for the tree has borne its fruit, the fig tree and the grapevine has yielded their wealth. Hadran alach shnei dayenu gezerot. We will return to you shnei dayan gezerot. V'silka la masechet ketubos, and tractate Kusuba is concluded.
Thank you.
Anybody want to say
Okay,
so 1 second, 10 seconds. All right. All right, here it is. Is this one, right?
Rabbi Hanania ben Akash Alsi.
You want to say?
Rabbi Hanania ben Akash מאוד תקות ברזק סוף יחוב ומצאו תשלום ועד רחוב צמן תקיע כזה בידיר. יפגע הדר ויזכר לו שמי רבו. לא מאוד יברוך ירוסי ונוח מחוסי ועשור וכל נבי קורא משיחי. ויחייכם ומייכם אחד לכל בישראל בגל וזמן קוראים רומין. שמי רבו מברח לעולם לא מאומה. יזבור ושאר ושבור 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 ויסדור 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 ושבור לקודשו וינחו. אלו מכל ביחד ושחש בחוש ונחמות סוד אמיר מורמובים רומין. ישראל ורבון ואתה מדי מהכל תמיד יסם מן כל מונדי עוסקים ברייסו דיבוס בכל עשר ועשר. יעלה נחש לו מרב וחינו וחיזו רחמים וכן נחש לו מזה נחש וכל מקודם עבודים שמי ואמרו אמן. יש לו מרב ומשמע וחיים תמיד עליהם כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. יש לו ממראים ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. השכיח, השכיח, השכיח. Daniel, השכיח, thank you very much.